The very first major community in North America is in the most unlikely place. It's in northern Louisiana. People think I'm crazy when I say this, but there is a pyramid in northern Louisiana, a big one, at a site called Poverty Point that is 3,500 years old. So it's the same age as the pyramids in Egypt. And it is a giant thing just poking out of the bayous of Louisiana. And people don't believe me when I say it, but it's there. We in America have kind of a collective amnesia. Like we never hear about these massive civilizations.
Lack of archaeological evidence is concerning if we're talking about something like the supposed existence of huge civilizations in the New World, as described in the Book of Mormon.
There were hundreds and hundreds of these big cities.
I call that unlikely, to say the least.
Hey, Truth Seekers, it's deja vu all over again. If you love history, if you love seeking truth, if you have an open mind and you love Jesus Christ, this video might just be for you. I recently posted a video throwing a little bit of shade on Trent Horn from the Council of Trent for how easily, I'm doing air quotes here, accidentally, Tucker Carlson found the overwhelming abundance of evidence to something that has eluded Trent Horn. You should go back and watch that if you want the context for this one. I didn't intend to go anywhere with that because, to be honest, this field of study is not my specialty, and it's not even really all that interesting to me, to be honest. But we know so much less than we think about anything and everything that we should be embarrassed to believe we really know anything at all. And so what's interesting to me is how easily and often we psychologically shield ourselves from dangerous, contrary evidence. That interests me, that process, that fact, and how often you see that pattern in the real world, in the wild. So I think my phone was listening to me because this gentleman's name is Ed Barnhart. And about a day or two after I posted that last video, I got a notification for this on Lex Friedman's show, which I don't typically, I don't think I subscribe to or watch, but I started watching it and thought, now this is convenient timing. How interesting, because this man is a expert on archaeology and American pre-Columbian civilizations. And so I watched this video and I clipped a few things for you to watch specifically about the early humans in North America, which I'll put in the teaser. And interestingly about how archaeologists sort out through the knowledge that they find. All right, I want to get to the content as soon as possible. So I'm just going to let you know, because a lot of people drop off in the first few minutes. I'm going to do this video in two parts. The first half is going to be related to the specific content that I referred to in the other video, which is the abundance of evidence of early humans in North America. We'll start with that. Show you a couple clips. Really fascinating stuff. But in the second half, I've scoured this 3-hour video for some clips that I think are very interesting as a Christian and as a believer, and as someone who listens to the scientific evidence they found and tries to piece it together while admitting that archaeology has an interpretation problem. Meaning they can find all of these things. They can dig them out of the ground, but they can't tell us why they're there. Who led these people to that area, what they were doing there, and why. So it's very interesting to hear him mention numerous things that are described in the Book of Mormon with context that he says are just going to have to remain a mystery because there's no way for them to figure out what's going on here, which brings up a couple really important and pertinent questions for me is that how, if these experts are getting all giddy about this now and telling us we've vastly underestimated the amount of people there, and we don't understand the cultures or the movements or the migrations of these people, and that we had no access to this information because it's all basically, he talks about why the information is difficult to find and why all the wisdom of these people is gone. He makes these amazing points that support the arguments in the Book of Mormon. But then he does interesting things tying together all these global civilizations to the same mythology, to the same single creator, to the flood myth, to the fact that they believed the Spaniards got here, they were deities. And he has no religious motive whatsoever. And in fact, one of the, after admitting that he has an interpretation problem, he tries to give his argument and explanation for why all these people share some of the same myths. It's a little bit funny, but not much funnier than what Trent Horn said.
Lack of archaeological evidence is concerning if we're talking about something like the supposed existence of huge civilizations in the New World.
I would love to hear your feedback after you watch this. Let me know what I missed. but I'm going to leave out a lot of important stuff he goes over in the video, which is the complexity of the civilizations, the evidence of their languages and how they tie back to other parts of the world, the sophistication of their buildings and their calendar system and their understanding of the cosmos and of astronomy. And he really, really peppers in some fascinating facets of knowledge about these people. And it's interesting to go through the comments when people say, this is amazing, I had no idea, I didn't know any of this. And as an LDS member who's read the Book of Mormon, my question to him in the comments, because he solicited questions from viewers, was, what are your thoughts on Joseph Smith allegedly translating a record of monotheistic temple building people in the Americas during the years 3000 BCE to 40 CE? Because he makes this argument in the video that they were monotheistic, which is very rare. They didn't have a pantheon of gods. They were temple building people everywhere they went. And the timeline adds up. It documents civilizations of millions of people, also in the video, coming in a handful of waves. That's supposed to say waves. I must be getting old. I make a lot of typing mistakes. From the old world. Joseph has been mocked mercilessly for claiming these civilizations existed, but now archaeologists like yourself are vindicating his writings, which he produced in his early 20s. Thoughts? Thank you for a great interview. And I mean that sincerely. So what I'm going to do, just to have a little fun, at Trent's expense, is every time he says something that's in the Book of Mormon, this book that supposedly doesn't have divine authorship and talks of a civilization which didn't exist, you're going to get the smoke detector meme. And it's going to sound like this. So I have no idea how many chirps there are going to be, but let's have a good time with it. Here we go.
You've also lectured about, which I really enjoyed, about North America, and also helped teach me that there's a lot more complex societies going on here for a long period of time. So maybe can we start at the beginning? Who were the early humans in North America?
Well, we go through that Paleo-Indian and Archaic period for thousands of years. As we started this conversation, probably, 30,000 years is a conservative now. Humans first enter the Americas. But the first cultures we get here are mound builders around the Mississippi and to the east, and then also a totally separate group in the what we call the American Southwest now, the Four Corners, who will develop into mostly the people we call the Pueblo people, who are still there today, like Zuni and Hopi people. So we've got these two clusters. The very first major community in North America is in the most unlikely place. It's in northern Louisiana. People think I'm crazy when I say this, but there is a pyramid in northern Louisiana, a big one at a site called Poverty Point that is 3,500 years old. So it's the same age as the pyramids in Egypt. And it is a giant thing just poking out of the bayous of Louisiana. And people don't believe me when I say it, but it's there.
The mound builders. What was that society like in comparison to everything else we've been talking about in Mesoamerica?
They evolved over thousands of years. We call them mound builders. This is something I, object to. I think we should have a better. We do the last version of them. We call them Mississippians now. But generally speaking, we call all these guys mound builders. But what they built were pyramids. They look like mounds now. And they didn't build them out of stone. That's kind of our just inherent Western bias. Something that's built out of stone is sophisticated, and something that's built out of dirt is rudimentary.
It's interesting because he talks about the Central American and Mayan people. He always refers to the pyramids as temples, which is probably more likely what they were.
But in their full living form, they did have cores of dirt, but then they also had kind of clay caps. So they had terraces, they had whole complexes of buildings up on top. There were kings that lived up there. There's the biggest of the Mississippian cities is called Cahokia, and it's right outside of St. Louis. And it was huge. It had a population of 20,000 people and pyramids all over the place, a huge palisade wall around it. It was absolutely gigantic, a thriving metropolis. And we in America have kind of a collective amnesia. Like we never hear about these massive civilizations. Cahokia was the the big first city, but then it spread from the Mississippi all the way to the Atlantic. There were hundreds and hundreds of these big cities that had, 5 to 10,000 people each.
Were they their own thing, or was there some kind of thread connecting all of them?
They had a unified religion and culture. They were, again, not an empire. So there were warring city-states. There were kind of territories that were owned by big kings, and then the cities around them were kind of the subsidiary lords and kings. And then one kingdom could either ally with a neighbor or have a fight. So they were kind of countries, I think, we could safely say there were different countries within this patchwork that was Eastern United States. And it's so weird that we don't know this, because it was clearly documented by the Spanish. I'm not talking about just archaeology. We find them in archaeology now, but Hernando de Soto landed in Florida and went for 3 years he went up into the Carolinas and over down into Alabama and Louisiana, and he's the first one to see the Mississippi up there. But for 3 years, he went through city after city after city, unfortunately decimating them, eating all their corn, giving them diseases. But, the documentation's clearly there. He met collectively millions of people in a very sophisticated and uniform civilization.
Remember, this is the argument from the Horn video. That didn't happen. Those civilizations weren't there, and this man who documented them, who was not religious, did not see them.
So it was disease and stealing of resources, but was there like explicit murdering going on?
Unfortunately, yeah. He was a murderer and a psycho and a liar. He snowed them that he was some kind of deity.
This is interesting. How would you snow these advanced civilizations into thinking you're a god? Ed was not asked this, and it doesn't come up anywhere in the video. But as you'll see in part 2 of this, I hope you stick around for it, he makes these declarations about the beliefs of these people and how many shared and overlapping beliefs they had. He even at one point calls it a global mythology relating to the flood. How is it that all these people believe the same thing? Well, I think that ties into why did they believe this murdering, thieving monster of a man was a deity, unless they were predisposed to believe that a deity would return.
He snowed them that he was some kind of deity, actually learned a trick from the Inca, who he was with Pizarro in his first run, and went back to Spain, was rich, had a wife, a castle. Then he got bored and he decided to have a reign of terror on Northern America for 3 years. But he had people burned at the stake. He had his dogs rip them apart. He was very, very brutal. He ruled that area through fear and had absolutely no respect for anybody. He made promises and broke them all the time.
Putting a chirp in here because it was predicted in the Book of Mormon this would happen to the seed of the people that remained on the American continent in detail, and who would do it and why they would do it and how those people would be redeemed and brought back to Christ before the return of the Messiah. Good times.
And no idea what an infectious disease was, but the reality was that this horde of diseases hit everyone, and the numbers are now saying in the first 50 years that 90% of everybody was dead, and that the number of people has increased as well. As far as our estimates, we're thinking it's somewhere around 150 million people, and 90% of them died, and with them all their knowledge. Imagine the moment where, who dies when things get bad? It's the young and the old. So all the knowledge keepers die suddenly. The children die. This next generation that's half taught and now completely demoralized, thinking that this is a spiritual attack, that their gods hate them, that the only way out of it is to accept this new Christianity. But they don't want to bring kids into this world where everybody's dying. And even if they do, they can't teach them what the old people were going to teach them because the old people are gone and didn't finish the transmission. So in a single terrible moment in human history, the generation loses all their knowledge. So a lot of the things that these people knew just blipped out.
But with that also just the wisdom of the entire civilizations.
So much of what they knew was just lost at that moment. We have the Maya who had those hieroglyphs, and that we've learned a lot from that.
Yeah, but not a significant integration of that wisdom into. So it wasn't when the Europeans came. It wasn't like the cultures were integrated. It was a story of domination, of erasure, essentially.
In North America, there's a new term in the literature that I like. We call it the Mississippian Shatter Zone. That Mississippian civilization was millions of people, but they got spread out all over the place over the next centuries. And now we have this shatter zone where we have ruins, and the people that were actually from those ruins are somewhere else on a reservation far away. And I'm just about to talk to a Cherokee man who listened to some of the things I had to say and says, all those Ho-Chunk things you were saying from that Ho-Chunk culture, my grandparents talk about this sort of thing too. Can I talk to you by phone and tell you about these things? So we've got this shatter zone where, we're going to try to put the puzzle back together, especially in terms of Mississippian religion. I really think we're making headway in this generation, and it's exciting to be part of piecing this old religion and its mythology back together.
Okay, that concludes part one with the focus on North America. In part two, I had about a dozen clips I wanted to use, but I narrowed it down to just a few to kind of paint a picture for you of some interesting things that happen here.
So there's interesting cultures developing in the Amazon. So religion, you would say, preceded civilization.
In South America, the Corral and Aspro that I was just talking about, it's weird what a dearth of art and any evidence of religion we have. We have those pyramids and things that we call temples, but we don't really know what went on in there. And
Then how do you conclude it's a dearth of religion if you know there's temples and what else?
No hints of religious iconography, ceremonies, nothing like that. The first stuff that we get is right when that culture ends, about 1800 BCE. This culture called Chavin starts up, and their main temple is up in the Andes, in this place of least resistance between the Amazon and the coast. It's about 3 days walk either way from this place where this temple is. That's where we start seeing the very first religious iconography, and it's all over the temples. There are things that are definitely from the coast, but the iconography are all jaguars and snakes and crocodiles, and those don't come from the coast. All of those things are coming out of the Amazon.
I mean, religion is a really powerful idea. Religions are one of the most powerful ideas. They're the strongest myths that tie people together. And to you, it's possible that this powerful idea in South America started in the Amazon.
I do think it did.
One of your more controversial ideas is that you believe that the religions, there's a thread that connects the different civilizations, the societies of the Andean region, and the religion they practice is more monotheistic than is currently believed in the mainstream.
That is exactly what I think. And I think it's all about this Fang deity who somewhere thousands of years ago crawled his way out of the Amazon up into the Andes, and a religion took hold. That could have been kind of a combination of ideas from the coast and the Amazon, but he is the one creator deity, in my opinion, through all of these cultures. And the people in the Amazon still talk about him. His name is Vihomase in some groups. But they say that his emissaries on Earth are the jaguars, and that he is the creator deity.
why is the current mainstream belief is that a lot of the religions are not monotheistic?
Well, there are bona fide pantheons. Greece had one, Egypt had one, Mesopotamia had one. Lots of the early religions of the old world were pantheons. And I think that was part of the problem. The earliest archaeologists walked in there with a preconceived notion that ancient cultures have pantheons. And so they went to the art looking for them. And they came up with things like the shark god and the moon goddess and the sun god and all these things. But when I look at the art, and I was trained by a person right here in Austin, Texas, as an art historian, you follow certain diagnostic traits through art to see the development over time. And when I look at it and use that methodology, there's a single face with goggle eyes and fangs and claws on his hands and feet, and snakes coming off of his head and off of his belt.
He mentions the snakes. I thought it was interesting. If you count the snakes, what number you get to? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, you can't see my cursor. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Probably a coincidence.
He's got really identifiable traits. He also likes to sever people's heads off and carry them around. But he's the fanged deity, and he's there. He shows up in Chavin de Huantar, the capital of that Chavin culture, and he keeps showing up through every culture, even thousands of miles away, throughout the next 2 millennium, right up to the Inca. The Inca have a creator deity they call Viracocha, but Viracocha is the fanged deity. He is, when we do see him, by the time you get to Inca, they do this kind of like almost Islamic thing where they say you can't understand the face of Viracocha. So when they do put him in a cosmogram, they'll make him just a blob, like he's just unknowable, but he's at the very top.
It's weird that he says that's an Islamic thing because he just described the role of the Father in the creedal Trinity, creedal interpretation of the modern Trinity. A Trinitarian 3-part blob where the Father has no face and can't be understood or interpreted or fathomed because of his vastness, but he's at the top. Spot on, Dr. Barnhart.
I think we're misunderstanding a lot of things that we used to say were deities as just supernatural beings. If we flip the mirror on Christianity and take a look at it, which of course Christianity's monotheistic, right? It would be heresy to say otherwise. But who are all these other characters? Who are all these angels and demons and, Jesus Christ? And I mean, I don't even know who the Holy Spirit is, but he's some sort of supernatural being. But it's that monotheistic system has lots of things that have supernatural powers that are not God.
Interesting he should say that. I was going to go in and tie scriptures to all these, but it will take me another whole day to put it together. So this one I do want to stop with. In Moroni 7, where Moroni is basically has described the carnage of the godless people warring each other. So when he talks about the God cutting off people's heads, which resulted from the apostasy and carnage and warfare, after the Christians were essentially wiped out. And just before, when they were doing all the same things the pagans were doing, Moroni wrote about these emissaries. The doctor referred to jaguars as emissaries and supernatural powers that aren't God. And it's interesting, this is about 400 AD in the Christian era, where Moroni is writing about how every good thing cometh from God and enticeth men to do good continually. Everything which inviteth and enticeth to do good and to love God is inspired of God. And then he says something curious that aligns with what Mr. Barnhart here is saying. He goes through the light of Christ, that everyone has it to know good from evil. And if we lay hold upon every good thing and condemn it not, we will certainly be a child of Christ. For behold, God knowing all things, this is in verse 22, being from everlasting to everlasting, behold, he sent angels to minister unto the children of men, to make manifest concerning the coming of Christ. And in Christ there should come every good thing. And God also declared unto prophets by his own mouth that Christ should come. And behold, there were diverse ways that he did manifest things unto the children of men, which were good. And all things which are good cometh of Christ. Otherwise men are fallen, and there could no good thing come unto them. Wherefore, by the ministering of angels, and by every word which proceedeth forth out of the mouth of God, men began to exercise faith in Christ. And thus by faith they did lay hold upon every good thing, and thus it was until the coming of Christ. And after that he came, men also were saved by faith in his name. And by faith they became the sons of God. And as surely as Christ liveth, he spake these words unto our fathers, saying, Whatsoever thing ye shall ask the Father in my name, which is good, in faith believing ye shall receive, behold, it shall be done unto you. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, have miracles ceased because Christ hath ascended into heaven, and hath sat down on the right hand of God to claim of the Father his rights of mercy, which he hath upon the children of men? And behold, because he hath done this, my beloved brethren, have miracles ceased? Behold, I say unto you, nay, neither have angels ceased to minister unto the children of men. For behold, they are subject unto him, to minister according to the word of his command, showing themselves unto them of strong faith and a firm mind in every form of godliness. And the office of their ministry is to call men unto repentance, and to fulfill and do the work of the covenants of the Father, which he hath made unto the children of men, to prepare the way among the children of men, by declaring the word of Christ unto the chosen vessels of the Lord, that they may bear testimony of him. Skipping down to verse 36, which stings. This is such a beautiful chapter from Moroni. Or have angels ceased to appear unto the children of men? Or has he withheld the power of the Holy Ghost from them? Or will he, so long as time shall last, or the earth shall stand, or there shall be one man upon the face thereof to be saved? Behold, I say unto you, nay, for it is by faith that miracles are wrought, and it is by faith that angels appear and minister unto men. Wherefore, if these things have ceased, woe be unto the children of men, for it is because of unbelief, and all is vain.
I do think it did. And you're right. Ideas are more powerful than weapons, but archaeology can't see them at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can see ideas manifesting in the things they create and lead to, but there's an interpretation problem. Are we right about what idea created this? Those are things that archaeology just can't get at.
That's one of the challenges of archaeology and looking into ancient histories. You're trying to not just understand what they were doing in terms of architecture, but understand what was going on inside their mind.
That's really what I'm in it for, trying to understand these people, and it's real detective work. And we know we're dealing with a totally flawed record. We only have what could preserve the test of time. You know, if we look around this room here, if 2,000 years of weathering happened in this room, what would be left? And what would we think happened here?
And one of the things I do obviously wonder about is why the flood myth is part of like most societies and most religions.
I think that one's pretty easy. It's the end of the Ice Age, but there's an interpretation problem when the bathtub filled back up.
Huh. So it's just the Ice Age bathtub refilling.
It's the seas filling back up.
And
this is what happens when archaeology tries to fill those gaps on their own. He's going to make the case that what he refers to later as a global mythology got all the way around the world, along with the temple building, the monotheistic deity, the Fang deity, the people who believed that God was going to return. The flood was because the flood mythology spread around the world because of this.
Without really understanding.
Filling back up.
And without really understanding what happened, they just carried that story.
Everybody knows that everybody's nice coastal village went underwater.
Yeah.
And they had to seek higher ground.
And then just like people like talking about the weather, everybody was talking about the weather for many generations as the sea level was going up. And then that myth carried.
Why do we live here, Grandpa? Well, we used to live over there, but then the water came.
And then many grandpas later, it just kind of permeates every idea.
It becomes mythology, but global mythology. So that one, there's a lot of things I don't have a reasonable explanation for, but the flood myth is almost certainly the rise in sea level. But there's an interpretation problem. Are we right about what idea created this? Those are things that archaeology just can't get at.
Okay. I think it's good that in most of these examples, he's not trying to fill the void with his own knowledge.
classic disappearance and the abandonment of all those cities happened, people just got sick of kings. They turned into this more council system at Chichen Itza. But then when Chichen Itza falls, there's a new city that's architecture looks a lot like Chichen Itza. It's called Mayapan, but it has what is called the League of Mayapan, and it has a council of representatives from the communities from all around the Yucatan, and it is basically a democracy. It is a Maya democracy that happens. That individuals from all around the Yucatan are there. They each family has their own council house at Mayapan, though they live back at their place. It's kind of like a Maya Congress.
Representative democracy.
It really was. I mean, and this happens in I guess 1250 AD. That this Maya democracy happens, and we know the names of them, we know the families, and of course they were humans, so eventually they screwed it all up. One family murdered another family, and the whole city burned.
Yeah, and of course it's probably some fascinating corruption, which is hard to discover through.
Part of it was the Aztecs screwing things up. The Aztecs came down with all sorts of, like, we'll buy everything you're making, and then eventually they were like, could we maybe buy some humans?
Yeah.
And then one family was like, no. And the other family was like, I don't know. They're making us a lot of money. So then, they murdered each other, and the water supply got polluted, and then the city burned.
Seems like slavery.
Now, I will admit, Trent Horn has one good argument. We don't know exactly which people lived where or when. We have a time range, but to pinpoint that Mayan civilization and say, hey, this one they think, and they don't either, by the way. Ed Barnhart says this is about 1400, CE. We don't know for sure. So that's all I got for you today. Hope you enjoyed it. For those of you who made it to the end of the video, thank you for watching. If you want to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, it's all good in the hood, but I got a lot of more videos I want to make. So I'd really love to hear from you on this. There are people who know this stuff like the back of their hand. I'm just demonstrating that people who deny it and ignore it all because their livelihood is tied to it, like Trent Horn, I get it. Like, it's going to be a life-changing thing if you admit that these things really did occur and that somehow Joseph Smith knew about them in great detail. And not just details about when, where, and why, but details about the human condition, human psychology, the way that people behave in certain situations, the way that they rebel against God, and what happens to the civilization over time as a result of that. Things that we experience in our lives today in rich detail over centuries, across civilizations, and across time with different groups of peoples doing things for different reasons. Fascinating insights. So just want to say thank you to Ed Barnhart and Lex Friedman for the excellent interview. I will link to it in the comments if you want to go check out the whole thing. It is over 3 hours long, so I watched it at 1.5 speed, but it's your life, your agency, and your body. So no one can tell you what to do with your body. Love you all. Talk to you soon. Look for you in the comments.